The Christmas Eve. I was 17. My mother pushed me onto the snow-covered porch and turned off the lights. 20 years later, when CNBC said my name with a $50 million valuation, they sent an invitation. Come home. Let's reconcile this Christmas. I agreed, not to forgive, but to blow open the doors they locked, in front of the whole town. My name is Marissa Hale. I am 37 years old, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of Solstice Urban. From my office on the 40th floor, I can see the towers of glass and steel that represent my $50 million real estate empire, an empire I carved out of the Denver landscape with my bare hands. The lights of the CNBC studio were hot, but I've learned to thrive in the heat. It's just pressure, and pressure is a tool. The anchor, a man named Brian whose smile never quite reached his eyes, leaned in for the segment's close-up. "Marissa," he said, the red live light glowing on the camera. "You're known as the silent hurricane of commercial real estate, an enigma. You came to Denver 20 years ago with, forgive me, reportedly less than $1,000. Now, you own half the skyline behind you." The monitor beside him displayed the Solstice portfolio. It wasn't just buildings, it was a strategy. Sleek glass towers reflecting the Colorado sun, revitalized historic blocks brought back from urban decay, and the new sustainable living complex that had landed me this segment. I gave them the answer I always give, the one my PR team polished, but that I had written. I don't build buildings, Brian, I build leverage. Hurricanes don't ask for permission. They fundamentally reshape the landscape. I just prefer to do it quietly. And unlike the weather, I focus on communities that others have written off. He laughed, a practiced, televised sound. "A hurricane with a conscience. Tell us, what's the secret? How does one go from nothing to this?" I looked directly into the camera lens, imagining not the millions watching, but the one person I knew wouldn't be. You learn to see value where everyone else sees ruin. You learn to be colder, smarter, and more relentless than any obstacle. And you never, ever let anyone else define your worth. You build your own shelter, and you own the lock. The interview was a success. I was polished, controlled, impenetrable. I was everything I had designed myself to be. Back in my corner office, the adrenaline of the broadcast was fading, replaced by the familiar, satisfying hum of the city 20 floors below. My monitor glowed with a cascade of congratulatory messages. Then, an email from an unrecognized address slipped through my executive filters. The subject line was just one word: Christmas. My fingers froze on the keyboard. The body was short, only 4 sentences. "Your father and I saw you on television. You've done well for yourself. We are hoping you will come home to Willow Bend for Christmas. Let's heal." I hit delete. My finger jabbed the key with a satisfying, violent force. Heal. What an audacious, grotesque word for them to use. As if what they did was a scrape, a simple wound that time could close. But my hand hovered. I moved the cursor to the trash folder and clicked Restore. The sender's name wasn't Mom. It was her full, legal name, the name she used for bank documents and tax filings. Evelyn Archer. Just seeing those 2 words together sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins, sharp and sudden, pulling me back across 2 decades. The glass walls of my office dissolved, replaced by a frosted window, a thick oak door, and the sound of a deadbolt sliding shut. It's Christmas Eve. I am 17, the main porch light of our Victorian house in Willow Bend, Montana, snaps off, plunging the yard into the deep, suffocating dark of a late December blizzard. My mother, Evelyn, stood in the sliver of light from the hallway, her face a mask of cold, theatrical righteousness. She was holding the empty, torn-open bank envelope. "You did this," she said. Her voice wasn't a shout. It was a verdict. It was calm, final. "You stole from your sister." "I didn't," I pleaded, my breath fogging in the freezing air. The wind was brutal, whipping my hair across my face. The snow was already seeping through my thin canvas sneakers. "Mom, please, I don't know what you're talking about. It's freezing. $11,800, she hissed, the numbers like pellets of ice. Lydia's tuition fund, gone, and you thought we wouldn't notice? You thought you were that clever? I didn't take it, I swear I didn't. Why would I do that? We know you did. She stepped back, her hand moving to the doorknob. The warmth from the house streamed out, smelling of pine and roasted turkey, a party I was suddenly uninvited to. You will not stay under this roof. You are not welcome here. We will not harbor a thief. The door closed. The deadbolt clicked shut. I pounded on the thick oak, the vibrations stinging my palms, my knuckles. Mom! Mom! Let me in! It's freezing out here. Let me in! Dad! I scrambled to the sidelight window, cupping my hands against the glass. Desperate. I saw him. My father, Thomas, was standing in the hallway, his shoulders slumped, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He was staring at his feet, at the ornate Persian rug. He didn't look up. He didn't move. Behind him, in the shadow of the dining room archway, my younger sister Lydia watched from behind the heavy velvet curtains. Her face was pale, unreadable, a ghost in our own home. She just watched me. Then she let the curtain fall. Back in my office, the air felt too warm, too still. My hand was shaking, not violently, but a fine, humiliating tremor, a betrayal by my own nervous system. Evelyn Archer. She hadn't used my name, just you. They saw me on television. Of course they did. $50 million. That's a number that gets attention. It wasn't the daughter they missed. It was the spectacle. It was the valuation. I minimized the email, but the memory it triggered was already playing out, vivid and cruel. They hadn't just accused me. They had presented evidence. The next morning, after I had spent the night huddled in the town's 24-hour laundromat, shivering between two humming dryers, my father met me at the Bell Tower Diner. He slid a manila envelope across the Formica table, still refusing to meet my eyes. Evelyn wants you to see this, he mumbled, staring into his black coffee. So you understand. Inside was a grainy, pixelated printout from the bank's security camera. A figure in a heavy winter coat. My coat, or one that looked just like it, the same faded blue, at the teller window. The timestamp was 3 days prior. That's not me, I whispered, pushing it back. My voice was raw from the cold. And this? He produced a withdrawal slip, cash withdrawal, $11,800. The signature on the line was a perfect, flowing replica of my own, Marissa Hale. I didn't sign this. Dad, you know my signature. But you know I didn't do this. Look at me. Tell me you believe me. He finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot and weary. The teller identified the coat. Marissa. The signature is a match. It's done. It's a lie. Someone is lying. Please, Dad, we can go to the bank. We can ask. Your mother says. He paused, clearing his throat, his gaze dropping back to the table. That it's better this way. You need to leave Willow Bend. Don't make this harder than it is. She's already spoken to the sheriff. She agreed not to press charges if you left town. He put a single $100 bill on the table and walked out, leaving me with the breakfast check and the fraudulent evidence of my execution. I didn't leave Willow Bend, not right away. I slept in my rusted-out 1988 sedan for 3 months, in the dead of a Montana winter. I learned to insulate the windows with cardboard. I worked 2 jobs, washing dishes at that same diner from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., smelling the food I couldn't afford, and stocking shelves at the grocery store from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., invisible in the fluorescent hum. I showered at the high school gym before anyone else arrived. I graduated with a GED because I couldn't bear to walk back into the school where Lydia was still a student, still the victim. When I had $700 saved, I bought a one-way bus ticket to Denver. I left without a word. I never looked back. In Denver, I poured concrete. I learned to frame houses. I got my realtor license, then my broker license. I bought my first dilapidated duplex with money I saved for 6 years. Living on instant noodles and stale coffee. I flipped it, doing the drywall myself until my fingers bled. I bought another. I learned finance at the community college. I learned zoning laws. I learned leverage. I built Solstice Urban Brick by freezing Lonely Brick. I stared at the email from Evelyn Archer. 20 years of silence. 20 years of building an armor so thick nothing could penetrate it. I reached into the bottom drawer of my mahogany desk. Beneath my corporate files, there was a small, velvet-lined box. Inside was a single Christmas card, the edges soft with age. It was from the year before the accusation. The front was a generic snowy village. Inside, my mother's perfect, looping cursive read, "To Marissa, the light of our lives, we are so proud of you. Love, Mom and Dad." The light of their lives, a lie so profound it was almost beautiful. My intercom buzzed, pulling me from the memory. "Ms. Hale, Jax is here." My assistant, Jax Morton, walked in. He's been with me for 8 years. A quiet man with thinning hair and an uncanny ability to find the truth in a balance sheet or a background check. He held a stiff, cream-colored envelope between his thumb and forefinger, as if it were contaminated. "This arrived by special courier, Ms. Hales." It bypassed security screening at the front desk. They were given my name directly. I looked at it. It wasn't the email. It was a physical letter. "It's from Willow Bend, Montana," Jack said, his voice carefully neutral. He knew the story, all of it. He was the only one. "I recognized the return address from your restricted files." I took it. It was thick cardstock, expensive, the same cream color as the invitation. My name was written on the front in that same flawless cursive. "The ink," Jax added, his eyes sharp. "It's a specific fountain pen blend, diamine royal blue, the same kind your mother has used for 30 years. I checked the logs. The courier was booked and paid for from a card registered to the Archer Family Trust. This was coordinated. The email was the probe. This was the broadside. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what it said. "Come home. Let's heal." I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The Denver skyline glittered back at me. My skyline. I had earned every inch of it. I had survived the snowbank, the car, the hunger, the isolation. I had become the silent hurricane. And now, the people who had tried to destroy me were inviting me back, not because they missed me, not because they were sorry, but because the light of their lives was now worth $50 million, and they had seen it on CNBC. They wanted something. The Archers always wanted something. A cold, clear certainty settled over me. The tremor in my hand stopped. I would go back. I had spent 20 years running from that snowy porch, 20 years building a fortress to keep them out. But you don't build a fortress just for defense. You also build it to launch a war from... They wanted to heal. They wanted a Christmas miracle. They wanted the world to see the wealthy, successful prodigal daughter returning to the loving arms of the family that had cast her out. They wanted my money, or my name, or both, to fix whatever problem they were in. I turned from the window, the city lights reflecting like armor in my eyes. "Jax," I said, my voice flat. "Yes, Ms. Hale?" "Get Aria Bloom on the line, and then get my PR team. Tell them we have a new project, codename Willow Bend." I picked up my personal phone and dialed the head of my public relations. "Sarah," I said, my voice smooth as steel. "We're adjusting my holiday schedule. I'm going home to Montana." I paused, looking at the elegant, cruel invitations sitting pristine on my desk. "They want to put on a show," I said. "Fine, but if they want a show, I'm going to write the script." Willow Bend was not a place I returned to. It was a place I had excavated from my memory, cataloged, and buried in a lead-lined box. But driving back, past the "Welcome to Willow Bend, Population 3012" sign, a sign that hadn't been updated since I left, was a lesson in the permanence of the past. The snow was cleaner here, the air sharper, the silence heavier. I wasn't alone. Jax had insisted on a 3-car convoy, my black SUV, flanked by two identical vehicles carrying my private security team, ex-Mossad and SAS, booked as corporate consultants. They were under strict orders, visible but detached. My return was to be a statement of power, not a plea. We turned onto Sycamore Street, and there it was, the house. It wasn't just a house, it was a performance. The Grand Victorian, the one that had always been a landmark, was now a grotesque beacon. Every inch of the facade, every gable, every line of the porch railing, was choked in blinding white and blue Christmas lights. It looked like a palace made of ice, desperate to signal warmth, but radiating only a cold, frantic energy. And they were waiting. Not just my family, the local press, a van from the Willow Bend Gazette, and, to my surprise, a crew from the regional news station in Billings. Their cameras were set up on the sidewalk, aimed directly at the front gate, waiting for the prodigal daughter's return. This was her stage, Evelyn's masterpiece, the miracle reunification. "Hold here," I said into the intercom. "Ma'am?" The driver, a quiet man named Kyle, replied. "Hold, let them wait." I watched for a full minute as the cameraman shifted his weight, stamping his feet in the cold. I watched the front door, waiting for the inevitable. It opened. Evelyn Archer glided onto the porch, a vision in a cashmere winter white coat, her silver hair perfect. She performed a look of surprise for the cameras, a hand fluttering to her chest, as if she hadn't orchestrated the entire scene. "Now," I said. The convoy moved in perfect sync. My car pulled smoothly to the curb. Kyle opened my door, and I stepped out onto the same patch of sidewalk where I had once waited for a school bus, desperate to escape. The air was frigid, biting. The cameras swarmed, microphones were thrust toward my face. "Marissa! Marissa Hale! Is it true you're here to reconcile?" I ignored them. My eyes locked on the woman on the porch. As I walked up the path, the same path I'd been thrown from, Evelyn descended the steps, her arms outstretched, her face a perfect mask of maternal joy and tearful regret. "Oh, Marissa," she breathed, loud enough for the closest microphone to catch it. "My baby, you're home. You're finally home." She pulled me into an embrace. It wasn't a hug. It was an act of possession. I stood rigid, my hands at my sides. The scent hit me, a sensory punch straight back to my childhood. Chanel No. 5, the smell of Sunday service, of parent-teacher conferences, of judgment and disappointment. She leaned in, her lips brushing my ear, the performance suddenly dropping for a single, chilling whisper. I have regretted that night every day for 20 years. It was a lie. The delivery was flawless, the timing impeccable, the sincerity utterly absent. She pulled back, dabbing a perfectly dry eye, and looped her arm through mine, turning us both to face the cameras. "Please," she said to the press, her voice trembling beautifully. "Give us this time. A family needs privacy to heal. This is our Christmas miracle." She led me inside, the heavy oak door closing on the press, sealing us in. The house was suffocatingly hot. The air was thick with the scent of pine and potpourri, and the living room. It was a shrine to the family that had continued without me. The walls were covered in framed photographs, Lydia's high school graduation, Lydia's wedding, Lydia's vacations, Thomas and Evelyn on a cruise, smiling, tanned. And then I saw it, the main fireplace mantel, the large, ornate silver frame that used to hold the family portrait from the year I turned 16. I was still in it, or rather, my shape was. Someone, presumably Evelyn, had not simply replaced the photo. She had taken a craft knife and meticulously cut my image out, leaving a blank, person-shaped void of white backing paper. Lydia stood on one side, her parents on the other, all of them smiling at the empty space where I had been. It was not an erasure, it was a statement, an amputation. We kept your room for you," Evelyn said, her voice faltering as she saw where I was looking. "Lydia, darling, come say hello to your sister." Lydia emerged from the dining room, not running, not eager. She was 34 now, still with the same pale, thin face, but the uncertainty had hardened into a brittle resentment. And she was not alone. Beside her, his hand holding a glass of whiskey he didn't seem to want, was Cole Whitaker. My breath caught, not in longing, in fury. Cole, my Cole, from high school. The boy I had cried to after arguments with my mother. The boy whose truck I had borrowed. The boy I had loved with the desperate, clumsy intensity of 16. He was here, standing next to my sister. "Hello, Marissa," Lydia said, her voice flat. "You look rich." Cole wouldn't look at me. He just stared into his glass, his face flushed. "Marissa," he mumbled, It's good to see you." The guilt wasn't just in his eyes. It rolled off him in waves. He was still the weak, handsome boy who followed the path of least resistance, and that path had apparently led him directly to my sister after I was gone. "And where's father?" I asked, my voice as cold and flat as the Montana landscape outside. "He's right here." I turned. In the shadow of the grand staircase sat Thomas Archer. My father. He was in a wheelchair. His face was sallow, his body shrunken. The man who had silently watched me freeze was now trapped in his own body. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second, filled with a familiar, terrifying cocktail of shame and helplessness. Then he looked away, staring fixedly at the wall, at the empty space in the photograph. He didn't say a word. The scene was complete. The grieving mother, the resentful sister, the guilty ex, the silent father, and me, the long-lost daughter, now cast in the role of savior. The next 24 hours were a blur of orchestrated nostalgia. Evelyn paraded me around, forcing me into conversations with neighbors who came by with cookies, their eyes wide with morbid curiosity. I said nothing. I simply observed. Jax, meanwhile, was not idle. He was quartered in the best suite at the Billings Grand, running our counter operation. The text came through on my encrypted phone on the morning of the 22nd. "Leak confirmed," it read. "Local event site, the Save the Archers Gala, December 23rd, $500 per ticket. Event page says 400 tickets sold. Primary sponsor, the Kestrel Foundation, and you, Ms. Hale, are listed as the guest of honor and keynote speaker." I closed my eyes. They weren't just inviting me home. They were selling tickets to my return. They had pre-sold my forgiveness to 400 people. The kitchen was frantic. Evelyn had hired a catering team, and they were bustling, preparing for the gala. I overheard the manager, a woman with a clipboard, briefing her staff. "Remember, the theme is reconciliation. It's about family. It's a Christmas miracle. Evelyn wants every interaction to reflect that. We are selling a story tonight. People." I needed air. I needed facts. I slipped away from the performative buzz and went to the one place in the house that had ever felt like a sanctuary, the library. My father's library. It was dark, paneled in mahogany, smelling of old leather and his pipe tobacco. But something was wrong. The room was colder, and a new, brushed steel digital safe was bolted to the wall behind his desk, a jarringly modern scar on the old-world charm. Evelyn's new command center. But Evelyn was arrogant. She was a stage manager, not a spy. She had grown accustomed to my father's passivity, Lydia's compliance. She had left her script on the desk. A stack of documents sat beside a leather blotter, weighted down by a brass eagle. "Archer Family Trust," the cover sheet read. "Loan restructuring." My fingers were steady. I flipped the page. It was a bridge loan, a recent one, dated April of 2023. My eyes scanned the numbers, my brain automatically processing the data. They were in debt, deeply. A balloon payment was due on January 1st. The amount was staggering, $780,000, secured against the house, the property, everything. They were going to lose it all. And then I saw the signature on the third page, the signatory for the loan's co-guarantor, Marissa Hale. I stared at it. It was a good forgery. It was my signature, But it was wrong. The H in hail was too perfect, the loop too practiced. I always signed with a slight upward slant, a hurried impatience. This was careful. This was deliberate. This was a forgery. My blood didn't run cold. It turned to ice, then to fuel. I pulled out my phone. I checked the date on the document. April 16th, 2023. I checked the notary stamp. Billings, Montana. I swiped to my calendar. On April 16th, 2023, I was not in Billings, Montana. I was in Tokyo, closing the Sumitomo Tower deal. I had the proof. My phone was a fortress of data. I had the plane tickets, the digital boarding pass stamps, the credit card receipts from the Okura Hotel, the metadata on the emails I sent to my board at 3 a.m. Tokyo time. I laid the document flat on the desk, the light from the window catching the slight indentation of the fraudulent signature. I took high-resolution photographs, page 1, page 2, the signature page, the notary stamp. I captured every detail. I opened my secure app and sent the images to one person, Aria Bloom, my attorney in Denver. The message was simple. Aria, execute search protocol, Tokyo, April, cross-reference attached. Prepare for war. I put my phone away, my heart beating a low, steady drum. I had it. The gun wasn't just smoking. I was holding it. I was about to leave when I saw another file in the open desk drawer. It was a simple manila envelope with a single label, Kestrel Foundation. The gala's sponsor, the charity. I didn't need to open it. I knew what it was. This was the mechanism. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A new text from Jax. He had been digging. The Kestrel Foundation, registered as a 51c3 charity. Evelyn is the sole director. Very little money out. Large sums in from anonymous donors. Money trail is highly suspicious. Looks like a classic pass-through. Digging deeper. I looked at the new safe, then at the envelope, then at the door. Evelyn wanted to play. She had cast me as the savior daughter, but she had forgotten one thing. I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was a developer. And I had just found the rot in the foundation. The dining room was a stage set for an intimate, high-stakes performance. There were 12 of us, a carefully curated audience for Evelyn's passion play. My mother sat at the head of the long mahogany table, radiating manufactured warmth. My father, Thomas, was placed at the opposite end, a silent, wheeled prop. Flanking the table were the necessary co-stars, Mayor Strickland, a local developer named Peterson whose handshake lingered too long, and Samantha Keene, the editor of the Willow Bend Gazette, her eyes missing nothing. And then there was the inner circle, Lydia, sipping her wine with a thin, brittle aggression, and Cole Whitaker, seated next to my sister, his gaze fixed firmly on his water glass as if it held the secrets to the universe. I was placed directly to Evelyn's right, the guest of honor, the fatted calf. The caterers, the same ones I'd overheard practicing their lines, served the first course. Evelyn tapped her crystal glass with a spoon. The room fell silent. "I want to thank you all for being here," she began. Her voice thick with emotion she had clearly summoned for the occasion. She reached over and placed her hand over mine on the table. Her skin was cold. "Tonight it is more than a meal. It is a homecoming. It is a testament to the fact that it is never, ever too late." She locked eyes with me, a single, perfect tear gliding down her cheek, leaving her makeup untouched. "We are here to celebrate new beginnings. We are here to celebrate that the bonds of family, though they may stretch, never truly break." The mayor nodded sagely. Samantha Keene, the journalist, was scribbling furiously in a small notebook. "I want to propose a toast," Evelyn breathed, raising her glass, "to second chances." A murmur of awe and how wonderful rippled through the guests, perfectly on cue, as if they'd rehearsed. "To second chances," the mayor echoed, and the table drank. I raised my glass of sparkling water. I did not drink. I just watched. The meal progressed. The conversation was a minefield of polite inquiries, all of which I deflected with the practiced ease of 1,000 board meetings. Lydia had been quiet, stewing, her resentment simmering visibly. Finally, as the main course was served, she set her knife down with a sharp click. "It's just so brave of you to come back. Marissa," she said, her voice loud enough to cut through the chatter. "All of this," she waved a hand at the dining room, the food, the guests. "It must seem so quaint to you, so small." The table quieted. "I mean," Lydia continued, a toxic smile playing on her lips, "it must be terribly lonely at the top of that Denver skyline, all alone up there, no one to trust, right?" The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Evelyn shot Lydia a look of pure, unadulterated fury. I placed my own fork down, my movements slow, deliberate. I looked directly at my sister. "Loneliness is a matter of perspective, Lydia," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room. "Sometimes it's just the price you pay for not being owned. You should try it." Cole flinched as if I had struck him. Lydia's face went pale with rage. Cole, desperate to diffuse the tension, turned to me, his shoulders hunched. "So, Marissa, Solstice Urban, that's really something. You're mostly in commercial development? Or is it residential?" He was trying, but he couldn't look at me. His eyes darted between his plate and Lydia, a man terrified of the woman sitting next to him. "We're diversified," I replied curtly. My father, Thomas, said nothing. He hadn't said anything. He just sat in his wheelchair, his head bowed, as a hired nurse seated behind him discreetly cut his food. He was a ghost at his own feast. It was then, in the suffocating quiet, that we heard it. A small sound from the grand staircase, the creak of a floorboard. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." Every head in the room turned. A little girl was standing on the landing, perhaps 10 years old, wrapped in a fleece blanket patterned with reindeer. She had a wild mess of dark brown hair, tangled from sleep. She scrubbed at her face, and as she stepped into the light of the chandelier, she looked down at the table. Her eyes met mine. My breath stopped. It wasn't a gasp, it was a cessation of all function. They were dark brown, almost black, with a faint, familiar ring around the iris. They were my eyes. The girl, confused by the silent, staring audience, started down the stairs. "Mommy, my throat's scratchy." Lydia, her face ashen, snapped, "Ivy, go back to bed, now. You're being rude." But the girl, Ivy, didn't look at Lydia. Her gaze was locked on me. She tilted her head, a look of profound, childish concentration on her face, a frown that was so familiar it felt like a physical blow. She walked right up to the table, to my chair. The room was so quiet, I could hear the girl's bare feet on the hardwood floor. She just stared at me. Then she whispered, "You're her." "Ivy," Evelyn warned, her voice dangerously low. Ivy ignored her mother and grandmother, her eyes wide, tracing my features. "You're the lady, from the box in the attic, the pictures, the ones Grandma cut up." The world stopped. It was not silence, it was a vacuum. The mayor, his fork halfway to his mouth, froze. Samantha Keene's pen had stopped, and she was staring, her jaw slack. Cole looked like he was going to be physically ill. Evelyn's hand, the one resting on the table, clenched into a white-knuckled fist. "Ivy Elizabeth," Evelyn snapped. Her voice was no longer a mother's, it was a commander's. "You will go to your room, right, now." The child flinched, the spell broken. Tears instantly filled her eyes, and she turned and fled up the stairs, her sobs echoing back down. Evelyn laughed, a high, tinny, terrifying sound. "Oh," she said, waving a dismissive hand at the stunned table. "Children and their imaginations. They find one old photo. You know how it is." She turned to the mayor. "Now, Bill, as I was saying about the zoning for the new community center." But I was no longer there. I was replaying the last 30 seconds. Ivy, 10 years old. The dark brown eyes, the bridge of her nose, and that frown. The specific, concentrated way her brow furrowed. It was the exact expression I saw in my own mirror every single morning when I analyzed a blueprint. This wasn't imagination. This was recognition. My phone vibrated in my lap, shielded by my napkin. I glanced down. A secure message from Jax. Jax. Found it. The Kestrel Foundation. It's receiving a steady automated payment. $5,000 a month. Wire transfer. Routed through an offshore shell LLC to remain anonymous. Started 5 years ago. My stomach twisted. I knew what was coming next. Jax. The originating account is yours. Ms. Hale. From your private Geneva holding. It's you. I found the transfers. I closed my eyes for a single, agonizing second. It was true. 5 years ago, after Solstice Urban had crossed the 9-figure mark, I had hired a private investigator for a simple wellness check. The report came back. The house was in foreclosure. The debts were piling up. I had set up the transfer, anonymous, untraceable, $5,000 a month, enough to keep the house from being seized, to keep them existing. I typed a reply under the table, my fingers moving stiffly. Me. It was guilt money. Jax, not forgiveness, just maintenance, to keep them from defaulting, to keep the past contained. Find out what she's doing with it. I had been paying to keep them quiet, to keep them solvent, to ensure they were never desperate enough to find me. And Evelyn, my mother, had taken my anonymous hush money, built a charitable foundation around it, and was now using it as the financial engine for her socialite games, and clearly to pay the interest on the fraudulent loan she'd taken out in my name. The dinner was fracturing. The guests were deeply uncomfortable. Cole suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "Marissa," he said, his voice thick. "Marissa, I need to talk to you, alone, about, before—" "Sit down, Cole," Lydia hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "No, Lydia, I have to—" He started to take a step toward me. Lydia's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. It was not a gentle gesture. Her red, painted fingernails dug into his skin, so hard I could see the white marks on his flesh from across the table. "I said," she seethed, her eyes burning, "sit down." He flinched, the fight draining out of him instantly, and he slumped back into his chair, a prisoner in his own life. The party broke up quickly after that. The mayor had an early morning. The journalist thanked Evelyn for a truly memorable evening. As the last guest left, Evelyn turned to me, her face a mask of serene satisfaction, as if the entire evening had been a smashing success, as if a child hadn't just exposed her deepest, darkest secret. She glided toward me, the hostess triumphant. "A wonderful night," she murmured, adjusting the pearl at her throat. "Everyone is so thrilled for us, for our reunion." "Is that what this was?" I asked. She ignored me, leaning in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Tomorrow night, at the gala, will be even better. The whole town will be there." She placed a cold hand on my arm. "I have a small speech prepared for you, just a few words to read on stage. A commitment document, if you will, to announce our new beginning, our joint family venture." I stared at her. A commitment document. She didn't just want my money. She wanted me to publicly sign my name and my brand over to her, on stage, in front of the entire town. She thought she had me. She thought that after the loan, the dinner, the emotional performance, I would be so desperate for reconciliation that I would sign anything. "I'll look at it in the morning," I said, my voice as empty of emotion as I could make it. "Wonderful. Darling," she smiled, a bright, predatory flash of teeth, and kissed the air beside my cheek. "It is so good to have you home." I walked away from her, up the grand staircase. I paused on the landing where Ivy had stood. I looked down at the empty, chaotic dining room, a battlefield of abandoned plates and wine glasses. I was no longer thinking about the fraudulent loan. I was no longer thinking about the gala. I was thinking about a box of cut-up photos in the attic. And I was thinking about a 10-year-old girl with my eyes. The house was dead silent. It was 4:13 in the morning, the darkest, coldest hour before the dawn. I didn't sleep. I don't sleep in enemy territory. I slipped out of the guest room, my feet silent on the thick runner of the hallway. The house was cold. The thermostat turned down to a miserly 60 degrees. I moved through the dark, past the dining room, a graveyard of half-empty glasses, and into the library. The new brushed steel safe was an ugly modern blot against the mahogany wall. A digital keypad glowed faintly. Evelyn was arrogant, but she was also a creature of habit. Her entire life was a series of rituals. I ran my hand along the bookshelf to the left, my father's books, philosophy, history, and her one affectation, a leather-bound copy of Walden. She loved to quote Thoreau at her garden parties. Speaking of simplicity while wearing a $10,000 watch, I pulled the book out. It felt light. I flipped to the back, and just as I remembered from the old safe, the last 20 pages had been carved out, but instead of a key, there was a small plastic USB drive, sloppy. I bypassed it. For now, I felt the spine, pressing the worn leather, and there it was, taped inside the cover, flat and thin, a small, black manual override key. She had a digital safe, but kept the analog backup in the exact same place she had hidden the key for 30 years. I knelt. Beneath the keypad, a small cover plate popped off, revealing the lock. The key slid in. I turned it gently, a quiet, satisfying thunk. The digital screen went blank, and the heavy door clicked open. No cash, just files, stacks of them. On top was a pristine, laser-printed document. Gala keynote speech, Marissa Hale. It was the commitment document she'd mentioned. I scanned it. It was full of saccharine language. Healing. Reinvestment in family. A new charitable venture. It was a pledge, a legally binding pledge, cleverly disguised as a speech, for $2 million to be transferred to the Kestrel Foundation, with Evelyn Archer as sole trustee. I photographed every page. Beneath it was a thicker file. Kestrel Foundation. Private mandates. My blood didn't just run cold. It evaporated. It was a durable power of attorney. Not for her finances, for mine. Marissa Hale, it read, hereby grants Evelyn Archer full and total authority to manage, direct, and execute all charitable assets, donations, and foundations established in her name. It gave her control, not just of the Kestrel Foundation, but, if interpreted broadly, it gave her a hook into Solstice Urban's philanthropic wing. It was a corporate raid disguised as a family reunion. And the signature, it was the same one from the loan document, the same careful forgery. I looked closer, my analyst brain taking over. The upward stroke of the H in Hale was too rounded. Mine was sharp, almost a slash, and the dot on the I in Marissa. I never dot my I's. It's a quirk from high school, a habit of speed. I just dash. This one was a perfect, deliberate, girlish circle. A forgery, a blatant, arrogant forgery, dated the same week in April I was in Tokyo. But there was something else in the safe, tucked in the back, something that didn't belong with the financial documents. A faded, pale green medical file, the kind with the tabs on the side, the label, typed on an old dot matrix printer, read, Archer, Lydia, St. Vincent's, 2004. 2004, the year before I was exiled, the year Lydia was desperately ill. I opened it. It wasn't about her diagnosis, which I knew had been a rare form of aplastic anemia. It was a single sheet. Family bone marrow compatibility test results. My fingers traced the names. Thomas Archer. 25% match. Evelyn Archer. 50% match. Marissa Hale. 0% match. My eyes locked on the number. 0. Not low, not a partial. 0. At the bottom of the page was a typewritten note from the oncologist. Compatibility results for sibling Marissa Hale are anomalous. Recommend follow-up testing to review blood relation and paternity. And stapled behind it, a handwritten note on a doctor's prescription pad, dated a week later. The handwriting was Evelyn's. Spoke with Dr. Peters. I assured him we are not interested in further investigation. The results are to be kept strictly confidential. This is a private family matter. Private. She had known. In 2004, she had medical, scientific proof that I was not her daughter, not my father's daughter, not in any biological way a part of their family. And a year later, she had me executed for a theft she invented. This wasn't an act of panic. It was a premeditated, calculated disposal of a person she had just discovered was a mistake. I photographed the report. I photographed the handwritten note. I slipped out of the library and onto the freezing back porch, the snow crunching under my boots. I dialed Aria Bloom in Denver. She answered on the first ring. My legal team was on full standby. Aria, I said, my voice a low whisper. Marissa, what do you have? I have the loan document from yesterday. I now have a second, fraudulent power of attorney, same forged signature, and I have a medical file from 2004, showing 0% blood compatibility with my sister, followed by a note from Evelyn refusing further investigation. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. My God, Marissa, this isn't just financial. This is motive. They're not just covering a debt. They're covering a 20-year-old secret. We have clear grounds for felony fraud, identity theft, and gross abuse of power. The POA alone is enough to freeze all her assets. With the loan, we can move for a criminal referral. Hold, I said. I'm not done. I need more. I need the mechanism. Understood. I'm filing the emergency motions now, but I'll keep them sealed until your word. I hung up and checked my secure messages. A new one from Jax. Jax. Audio bug is live. Planted by my AV tech this morning. He was testing the Gala sound system. It's in the master bedroom, inside the smoke detector. She's awake, and she's on the phone. Jax was the best. He hadn't just been digging, he'd been planting. I put in my earbud, the military-grade one that looks like a hearing aid, and listened. I heard the rustle of sheets, then Evelyn's voice, not the warm, tearful performer. This was the voice I'd heard on the porch at 17. Cold, hard. Ethan, she knows, Evelyn said. She was in the library. The safe's internal sensor pinged my phone. My heart hammered. She knew. A man's voice answered, smooth and professional. Evelyn, calm down. We planned for this. Is anything missing? I don't know. I haven't checked, but she smells it. The gala, the money. She's not the broken child I expected. Then we accelerate. The man, Ethan, said, I've already drafted the report. The unstable daughter. We leak it to Samantha Keene at the Gazette this afternoon. Estranged daughter. History of emotional distress. Returns not for family but for money. We paint her as volatile, grasping. We'll say she's threatening her sick father. By the time she's on that stage tomorrow, the entire town will see her as a predator. Good, Evelyn said. That's good? And the Kestrel money? The foundation? It's perfect, Ethan said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. We're clean. The $5,000 a month she's been sending. That guilt money you found? It's the best cover we could ask for. It establishes her own pattern of funding the foundation. We've been washing our other funds right alongside it. If she investigates Kestrel, she implicates herself. Ethan Vale, her financial advisor, and, from the intimacy of the call, her lover. They weren't just partners in fraud. They had used my own money, the money I sent to keep them from homelessness, as the laundry soap for their criminal enterprise. A trap within a trap. My money, my signature, my name. I triggered the recording function on my app, backing up the entire conversation to a private cloud, triple encrypted, hosted on a server in Switzerland. I had the fraud, I had the motive, and now I had the conspiracy. I went back inside, my mind a steel trap, clicking through scenarios. I needed to see Ivy's words, the box in the attic, The attic stairs were in the back hallway, hidden behind a paneled door. I pulled the cord. The stairs groaned down. The air above was cold, smelling of cedar and decay. I climbed up. The attic was vast, a graveyard of forgotten furniture and trunks. In the far corner, under the eaves, was a stack of boxes. Lydia's trophies, Christmas ornaments, and there, my old steamer trunk, the one I'd packed to go to college. It was empty, my journals, my books, my letters, all gone. But next to it was a simple cardboard box, marked Old Linens. I lifted the lid. It was my face. Hundreds of times. It was every school picture, every birthday, every Christmas morning. It was the girl in the family portrait from the mantel. She hadn't just cut me out. She had saved the pieces, every single photograph of me, snipped, cut, and amputated from the family record, was in this box. And on top of the pile of smiling, severed faces was a manila envelope. On it, in Evelyn's perfect cursive, was one word: destroy. She couldn't even bring herself to do it. She couldn't destroy the evidence of my existence, so she had buried it, just as she had buried me. I stood there, in the freezing dust, holding 20 years of my own excised life. Enough. The voice was a dry rasp, barely audible, from the bottom of the stairs. I nearly dropped the box. I crept to the opening and looked down. In the shadows of the hallway sat my father, Thomas, in his wheelchair. He was looking up, his face a gray mask in the gloom. "Enough," he whispered again, his voice cracking with a terrifying, ancient grief. She'll do it again. She'll destroy you. You need to know all of it." I descended the stairs, my movements stiff. I pulled the cord, and the attic door sealed itself with a heavy thud. I looked at the man who had been my father. "Tell me," I said. He shook his head, his eyes wet. "Not here. The library." I wheeled him into the library, the room where I had just uncovered the secret of my birth. I locked the door. I sat in the leather chair opposite him. I took out my phone, placed it on the desk between us, and pressed record. "Tell me," I said again. He stared at his hands, his knuckles white. "The money," he began, his voice a ghost. "The $11,800 for Lydia's tuition." "What about it?" It was Evelyn." I didn't react. I just waited. "It was 2005, he said, the words spilling out, dry and painful. "A few months after the doctor's report, the 0%. He was crying now, silent tears rolling down his sallow cheeks. "She was obsessed. She called you the mistake. The flaw in the bloodline. She said you didn't belong. She went to the bank. She wore your old blue coat, the one with the hood. She wore a beanie. She practiced your signature for a week." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I saw her practicing." "And you said nothing," I stated. "She withdrew the cash and the tip money, the $200 they found in your room. She planted it. She took it from her own wallet and she put it under your mattress herself. She told me she was doing it. She said it was the only way to protect Lydia, to protect the family from you." He slumped, the confession draining the last of his strength. "She built the evidence. She called the sheriff, our friend, and told him the story before you even woke up. She had it all planned." I looked at this shell of a man, this hollowed-out coward who had sacrificed his daughter to appease his wife. "And you," I said, my voice cutting through his sobs. "You stood in the hallway. You watched her lock the door. You let me freeze." He didn't deny it. He just covered his face with his trembling hands and wept. A 20-year-old confession that had come far, far too late. I stopped the recording. I saved the file. His confession about the $11,800 was just the prelude. The true, rotten core of the story was still lodged deep inside him. I didn't speak. I didn't offer comfort. I just let the silence in the library press down on him. My phone on the desk. its small red light an unblinking eye, recording every second of his disintegration. It wasn't just the money, Thomas finally choked out, his hands twisting in his lap. That was the end. The beginning was the year before, 2004, when Lydia got sick. He looked up at me, his eyes swimming in a pathetic, desperate plea for understanding. The doctors at St. Vincent's, they needed a bone marrow match. We all got tested. You came back, 0%, like the report said. He gestured weakly to the files I'd left on his desk. They told us it was an anomaly, he whispered. But Evelyn, she doesn't believe in anomalies. She believes in order. She hired a private firm from Bozeman. They did an investigation into the hospital, the maternity ward, from 1988, the year you were born. Here it was, the final, foundational truth. There was a mistake, he stammered, the words catching in his throat. A nurse, a mix-up, 2 babies, switched. I said nothing. My entire past was fracturing, falling away like brittle glass, and I just sat there, my spine rigid. I was not Marissa Hale. I was not Marissa Archer. I was an error. Your mother? He corrected himself. Evelyn. She became obsessed. She found the other family. They had a daughter. Her daughter, she said. But they were poor. Lived in a trailer park outside Missoula. She said the girl was ruined. She went to see them. She said they didn't even look right. He was rambling, the memories flooding out. She came back, like a woman I'd never seen. She said the universe had played a joke, that you, he pointed a trembling finger at me, were the joke. You were the flaw, the cuckoo in her nest. She said every time she looked at you, all she could see was the error, the stray, the thing that didn't belong. This was the woman who had written "The Light of Our Lives" in a Christmas card. She became convinced you were a contamination, he continued, his voice barely audible. She said you were going to take what belonged to Lydia, her health, her money, her place. When the doctor's report came back, she held it up, and she smiled. She said, "See? She isn't even blood. She has no right. The plan, to get rid of you, she started it that night. My exile wasn't a punishment. It was a sanitation." She faked the evidence, he confirmed, his voice hollow, echoing what I already knew. She coordinated with neighbors, told them you'd been erratic, that you were unstable. She had a speech, a written speech, for the sheriff, about protecting her vulnerable daughter Lydia from the cuckoo. He had watched her plan the entire thing. He had read the script, and he had played his part, the silent, grieving father. I should have felt fury. I should have felt a white-hot rage. Instead, I felt a profound, chilling clarity. It was the feeling I got before a major acquisition, when I could see every variable on the board. The woman who raised me was a sociopath, and my father was a ghost. That's not all, he whispered, his body collapsing in on itself. There's more. The worst part. I waited. The audio file was growing. Years passed, he said. We didn't hear from you, Evelyn. She built her walls, the foundation, her life. But Lydia couldn't have children. After she and Cole got married, the illness, it had damaged her, scarred her. I saw the pieces moving, aligning into a shape of pure, grotesque horror. Evelyn couldn't accept it. Thomas wept. She said the bloodline had to continue, the Archer name. She said you owed us. You owed Lydia. You had taken Lydia's life, her normal life, and you had to pay for it. What did she do? Thomas? My voice was flat, a blade. He flinched. 2015. She found a clinic in Santa Fe, a special clinic, Desert Ridge. She She called it a gray procedure. She told Lydia she had found a donor. My blood stopped. She, they, they needed eggs, he sobbed, the words tearing out of him. And Cole, from before, when you two were in high school, he'd frozen sperm for a medical thing. He told Evelyn about it once, and she remembered. I stood up. Marissa, she took from you, he gasped. When you were in college, you had an appendix surgery in Billings. You were unconscious. Evelyn, she signed the papers. She paid the doctor extra. They harvested. They implanted in Lydia your eggs and Cole's. He broke, a raw, howling sound that seemed to come from the center of the earth. He was confessing to a violation so profound there was no name for it. Ivy. The dark brown eyes, the concentrated frown, the small, almost imperceptible bump on the bridge of her nose, the same bump I saw every time I looked in the mirror, the one I inherited from no one I knew. The girl who looked at me and said, "You're her." Ivy wasn't my niece. Ivy was my daughter. My daughter, birthed by my sister, from my stolen eggs and my high school boyfriend's sperm, all orchestrated by the woman who had written "destroy" on a box of my memories. The room tilted. I put a hand on the desk to steady myself. My phone, lying on the blotter, buzzed. A new, encrypted text from Jax. I read it, my vision narrowing to a single point. Jax, anonymous tip, medical files, Desert Ridge Hospital, Santa Fe, file code DR1488, subject, Jane Doe, cross-referenced with your Billings appendectomy. 2009, procedure, oocyte retrieval, patient under general anesthesia. Consent form signed by Evelyn Archer as medical proxy, status, marked as destroyed. I have the file. I looked at the man in the wheelchair. He was still sobbing, a puddle of a human being. I turned off the recorder, I saved the audio. I then opened my video camera, turned on the flash to illuminate his face, and hit record. "Thomas," I said. He looked up, his face a ruin of tears and snot. "I need you to say it again, for this." What? The truth, all of it, from the $11,000 to the eggs. I need you to sign your confession. "Marissa, please. I'm a sick man. You are a coward," I said, my voice devoid of all heat. "You are an accomplice. You will do this. You will sign the statement I am about to type, and you will read it, on this camera. You will state that you watched Evelyn Archer frame me. You will state that you knew she faked the evidence. You will state that you knew, and you let it happen. You will state that you chose silence." I pulled a piece of my father's heavy, cream-colored letterhead from the desk, rolled it into his old typewriter, and began to type. My fingers flew. The clack, clack, clack of the keys, the only sound in the room, sharp and rhythmic, like nails in a coffin. When I was done, I put the paper and a pen in his lap. I chose silence," he whispered, reading the last line. "I chose silence twice." "Sign it." His hand, shaking violently, scrawled a pathetic, spidery signature at the bottom. I took the paper. I held it up to the video camera, then focused back on his face. "Read it." And he did. He read his own execution, his voice cracking, stumbling over the words that damned them both. I had the medical report from 2004. I had the fraudulent loan from 2023. I had the forged power of attorney. I had the audio of the conspiracy with Ethan Vale. And now, I had the signed, videotaped confession of my father, detailing the original crime. I had every single piece of the weapon. I walked to the great bay window of the library. Outside, the snow was falling, thick and silent, burying Willow Bend in a blanket of false purity. I stared at my reflection in the cold glass, my face, superimposed over the white, dark world. I saw the girl who had been cast out, and the woman who had come back. My reflection, and the image of Evelyn in my mind, we were like two parallel lines in the glass. We were daughter and mother, creator and creation, but we would never, ever meet. We would just run, side by side, into infinity, forever separate. I would not run. I would not disappear. I would not let this remain a secret. She wanted a gala. She wanted a stage. She wanted to use my name, my money, and my face to save herself. She would have all of it. I pulled out my phone. First, I sent the video file of Thomas to Aria Bloom, with the message, "The final piece, secure it." Then, I called Jax. "Jax," I said, my voice clear and strong. "The gala. I need a film crew. Not just one camera for the press. I want a full documentary crew. Find the best independent team you can. Someone hungry. Someone who knows how to tell a story about truth. Second Light Studios. Maybe. Get them on a jet. Tonight." "A documentary crew?" Jax's voice was steady. "May I ask the angle?" "The angle is the reconciliation. A daughter, a family, a miracle. We'll feed them that. They'll be disguised as my personal media team, hired to capture the healing journey, get them credentials, get them backstage." "Understood. And Aria?" "Aria is preparing the writs, full injunctions, asset freezes, criminal referrals for fraud, identity theft, and something much worse. Tell her to have a runner on standby, ready to file the moment I give the signal, not before. And Jax, the private security. On site, ma'am, blended with the catering staff. Change their mandate. They are no longer here to protect me from the family. They are here to protect the event from the family. They report to me, only me. Understood?" "Yes, Miss Hale." "My mother wants to put on a show," I said, looking at my cold, hard reflection in the glass. "She wants a performance. I'm going to give her a finale." The night of December 23rd, the Archer house was no longer a home. It was a snow castle, a blinding white mirage. Evelyn had outdone herself. The sheer volume of lights was almost violent, a desperate attempt to project purity and warmth. 500 people had come, the entire social, political, and financial ecosystem of Willow Bend, packed into the grand ballroom, spilling onto the heated terrace. They paid $500 a ticket to see the miracle. 3 local news stations had vans parked on the street, their satellite masts raised, and in the back, streaming a clean 4K feed to the Solstice urban servers. My crew, Second Light Studios, disguised as my corporate media team, had 3 cameras, their red recording lights glowing like predatory eyes. I was in the library, the designated green room, when Evelyn swept in. She was wearing a floor-length, emerald green velvet gown, diamonds at her throat. She looked magnificent, triumphant. "Darling," she breathed, rushing over. She didn't hug me. She adjusted the shoulder of my simple black Armani sheath. "You look severe, but strong. That's good. They'll love it." She pressed a stack of neatly typed 5x7 cue cards into my hand. "Here it is," she whispered, her eyes glittering. "The commitment document. I had Ethan Vale's office draft it. It's perfect. You read this, and there won't be a dry eye in the house." I glanced at the first card. I, Marissa Hale, do hereby pledge my full support, a foundational gift of $2 million, to the Archer Family Legacy Fund, to be managed in perpetuity by its chief trustee, Evelyn Archer. It was the same pledge from the safe. She was handing me the weapon she had forged, expecting me to fire it into my own chest. "It's beautiful, Mother," I said, my voice soft. Her face relaxed into pure, ecstatic relief. She had won. The $50 million hurricane was tamed, back under her control. I knew you'd see, she whispered, kissing my cheek. It's all for family. Marissa, it always has been. Now, they're waiting for you. The mayor is finishing your introduction. I smiled, a tight, small smile that didn't reach my eyes. I'm ready. She led me to the edge of the ballroom, where a temporary stage had been built. The mayor was at the podium, his voice booming. A story for our times. A story of forgiveness. Please welcome home Willow Bend's own, the CEO of Solstice Urban, the miracle herself, Marissa Hale. The applause was a deafening wave of sound. 500 people, blinded by Christmas lights and Evelyn's narrative, rising to their feet. The flashbulbs were blinding. I walked onto the stage. I saw the front row. Evelyn, taking her seat, beaming like a queen. Thomas, beside her in his wheelchair, his face gray, staring at his lap. Lydia, next to him, her arms crossed, her face a mask of sour resentment. And Cole, next to Lydia, looking like he was about to vomit. I placed my cue cards, her $2 million pledge, neatly on the podium. Then I set them aside. Good evening, I said. My voice was amplified, filling the room, sharp and clear. The applause died down. Thank you, Mayor Strickland. Thank you all for coming. My mother, Evelyn Archer, has invited me here tonight to celebrate a reconciliation. She even prepared a speech for me. I tapped the cards. A commitment document, she called it. Evelyn's smile was radiant. It's a beautiful speech, I continued, my hands resting on the edge of the podium. It talks about family legacy and new beginnings, but I've learned in my business that you cannot build a new structure on a rotten foundation. You must expose the rot, first, all of it, in the name of transparency. Evelyn's smile faltered. I believe in transparency, I said. So let's be transparent. I nodded to the back of the room. Jax, at the tech booth, hit the cue. The massive projector screen behind me, which had been displaying a tasteful Welcome Home Marissa graphic, snapped to black. Then, it lit up with a high-resolution image of a bank document. This, I said, my voice cutting through the sudden, confused silence, is a loan restructuring document for $780,000. It's a balloon payment, due in 8 days. That would have forced the sale of this very house, the house my family was so desperate to save. A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. But look closely, I said, as Jack zoomed in. There's a co-guarantor, a signature, my signature, Marissa Hale. The image was crystal clear, the forged H, the circled I. It's a very good forgery, I said calmly, but it's not mine. You see, the document was notarized here in Billings on April 16th of this year, which was a problem. Jax hit the next cue. The screen split. On the right, the loan document. On the left, a new image. My digital boarding pass, American Airlines, first class, Denver to Haneda, Tokyo, dated April 16th. Because on April 16th, I said, I was in Tokyo, closing the Sumitomo Tower deal. I was not in Billings, signing a loan document for a family I hadn't spoken to in 20 years. The room was dead silent. You could hear the ice clinking in glasses. I heard a single, sharp whisper from the front tables. Oh my God, she forged it. Evelyn was half out of her chair, her face white. Now I know what you're thinking, I continued, my voice conversational. You're thinking, why? Why would a mother do this? It seems extreme, even for $780,000. I paused, but you see, this wasn't the first time my mother had forged documents to get what she wanted. It was just the first time she needed my money. The other time, she needed my absence. I nodded to Jax. The screen changed. A new document, pale green. St. Vincent's Hospital, 2004. Bone marrow compatibility test results. My sister Lydia was sick, I explained, my voice still calm, but harder. We were all tested. My father, Thomas, 25% match. My mother, Evelyn, 50% match. And me, Marissa Hale, 0% match. I let the words hang in the air. 0. 0, I repeated, and a note from the oncologist. Compatibility results anomalous. Recommend follow-up testing to review blood relation. I turned my gaze from the crowd and settled it, for the first time, on my father. The camera from Second Light Studios followed my gaze, and his gray, tormented face filled the side monitors. Because the woman I called Mother had just discovered a 20-year-old secret. I was not her child. I was a hospital mix-up. I was an error, a flaw in the bloodline, and a year later, she corrected that error. I looked back at the crowd. She accused me, a 17-year-old girl, of stealing $11,800. She faked the evidence, planted it, and convinced the town, and on Christmas Eve, she pushed me out that front door. I pointed to the entryway, into a snowstorm, and locked the door. Stop! Evelyn's scream was primal. She lunged from her chair, her green dress flowing, her face a mask of pure, murderous rage. Stop it! Lies! She's lying! Turn off the cameras! Turn them off! She rushed the stage. 2 of the caterer-uniformed security guards, her security guards, she thought, stepped into her path. "Ma'am, you need to step back," one of them said, his voice polite but firm. Evelyn stared at him, confused. "What are you doing? I am paying you. Stop her." "Our contract was updated this afternoon, Mrs. Archer," the guard said, not moving. "Our orders come from Ms. Hale." Evelyn froze. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The moment the stage manager realized she had lost control of her own production, "She's right." A new voice, high and shrill, Lydia. She was on her feet, her face blotched red, tears streaming. She pointed at me. "She's right. You never belonged here. You were never one of us. You were just the mistake we had to live with. You were the cuckoo." She was confessing, in her blind rage. She was confirming everything I said, on a live feed, to the 500 most influential people in her life. Cole, finally snapping to action, grabbed her arm. "Lydia, for God's sake, shut up! Sit down!" "Get off me, Cole! It's true! She came back here to destroy us!" And from the archway to the main hall, a small voice. "Mommy?" Ivy. She was standing there, in her reindeer pajamas, clutching her teddy bear, her eyes wide with terror at the chaos, the shouting, the cameras. My plan, my script, every calculated move, none of it had accounted for her. The cold, surgical rage I had felt for 2 days evaporated. All I saw was a terrified 10-year-old girl with my eyes. I stepped away from the podium. I reached up and tapped my lapel mic, creating a sharp squeal of feedback. Then I hit the mute switch. I walked off the stage. I walked past the stunned guards. I walked past Evelyn, who was now frozen, watching me. I walked past Lydia, who was sobbing in Cole's arms. I knelt in front of my daughter. The cameras were all behind me, but they were still rolling. The room was silent, watching. "Hey," I whispered, just to her. "This is just a lot of loud noise. It's just grown-ups being messy. None of this is your fault. You are not a secret. You are not a mistake. You understand me?" She stared at me, her eyes just like mine, and nodded, her small hand gripping my arm. "Good." I stood up, and as I turned back to the stage, I gave Jax the final signal. A new sound filled the room. Not my voice, not Lydia's. It was Evelyn's voice, captured by the bug in her bedroom. Cold, hard, clinical. "Ethan, she knows. She smells it." The audience gasped. Then, Ethan Vale's voice, smooth and condescending. "We accelerate. I've already drafted the report. The unstable daughter, we leak it. We paint her as volatile, grasping. We'll say she's threatening her sick father." Evelyn's voice again. "Good. That's good. And the final line from Ethan. By the time she's on that stage, the entire town will see her as a predator. Will force a settlement. The audio cut to silence. The ballroom exploded. It was pure chaos. People were shouting. Samantha Keene, the journalist, was running for the stage, yelling questions. The mayor was backing away, as if the front row was radioactive. This was the climax, the fraud, the conspiracy, the public execution of Evelyn Archer's reputation. But as I stood there, watching the woman who had framed me be devoured by the town she had tried so hard to rule, I knew the truth. This wasn't the end. This was just the overture. I still had the confession of Thomas Archer. I still had the medical file from Desert Ridge. I hadn't told them the real story. I hadn't told them about Ivy. That I was saving, the real high-stakes play, the one that truly mattered. I was holding close. That was not for them. That was for me. The gala was a detonation. The fallout was immediate. By sunrise, the Willow Bend Gazette was in tatters. Its editor, Samantha Keene, facing accusations of being Evelyn's duped mouthpiece. The regional news feeds were playing the audio of the Evelyn-Ethan conspiracy on a loop. My reconciliation had become the Willow Bend betrayal. I wasn't in Willow Bend to watch the fires. I was in Billings, in the temporary command center Jax had established in a sterile, glass-walled office suite. At 9 a.m., he arrived, Ethan Vale. He wasn't the smooth, confident voice on the recording. He was wearing an impeccably tailored suit, but his eyes were bloodshot, and a small muscle twitched in his jaw. He was a predator, wounded and cornered. He walked into my conference room, uninvited, and dropped a heavy leather satchel on the table. "You've had your fun, Ms. Hale," he said, his voice a low growl. "You played your theater for the local yokels. Now, you and I are going to have a very different conversation, a professional one." I was sitting at the head of the table, a cup of black coffee in my hands. Jack stood by the window, silent, observing. "I'm not here to talk about Evelyn," Ethan continued, pulling a file from his bag. "She's an emotional, foolish woman. This is about you, and me, and this." He slid the file across the polished table. It was a stack of bank statements, my bank statements, from my private Geneva account. $5,000, he said, tapping the top page. "Every month, for 60 straight months, wired from your offshore holding, through a Cayman shell, and landing right in the Kestrel Foundation's primary account." He leaned in, his confidence returning. This was his ace. "You didn't just donate, Ms. Hale. You used the exact same channels I use. You created the pattern. You established the wash. As far as the federal government is concerned, you aren't the victim here. You are the architect." This was his leverage, the grand, brilliant threat he'd been holding. "Here is my offer," he said, his voice dropping. "It's a compromise. You want the house? You want to destroy Evelyn? Fine. You can have them. In return, I need a signed affidavit stating that your payments to Kestrel were charitable and that you had no knowledge of my other clients. Using the same fund, you will back my story. You will legitimize the foundation." "And if I don't?" I asked, my voice genuinely curious. He smiled, a thin, reptilian smile. "If you don't, then by noon today, a formal complaint will be filed with the Department of Justice and the IRS. It will name you, Marissa Hale, as a co-conspirator in a multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme. Your assets will be frozen by 5 p.m. Solstice Urban will be under federal investigation by Monday. That self-made brand you've built, the silent hurricane, it will be vaporized. You'll be the girl who clawed her way out of Montana just to become a more sophisticated criminal than the mother who exiled you." He sat back, triumphant. He had just laid down what he thought was a royal flush. I looked at his file. Then I looked at Jack's. Jax gave a nearly imperceptible nod. I smiled, a real, slow smile. "That's a good story, Ethan," I said. "It's clean, it's simple, and it's completely wrong." His confidence wavered. What are you talking about? You think you're the only one who does due diligence? You think I came back to Montana without a map? I pushed his file back toward him. You see, while you were busy admiring my $5,000 transfers, my team was admiring your $14.7 million problem. His face went gray. Voss Vale Capital, I said, leaning forward. That's your primary shell, isn't it? Registered in Delaware, it's the private wealth management firm you use to advise your clients. And by advise, I mean embezzle. You've been skimming from their portfolios for 8 years, a little from here, a little from there. And where does all that lovely stolen money go? I tap the table. It goes to a fund in the Caymans, Apex Global Strategies. From there, it's donated in large, untraceable blocks to the Kestrel Foundation, where my mother, Evelyn, bless her heart, signs off on a dozen non-existent community beautification projects and youth art programs, effectively washing your stolen cash. You then transfer the clean money back to your personal accounts, minus Evelyn's tidy management fee. Ethan Vale was no longer breathing. He was just staring. My $5,000? I laughed. That wasn't the architect. That was the cover. It was the fig leaf. It was the only clean money that foundation had ever seen. And you used it to hide your $14.7 million embezzlement scheme. You didn't trap me, Ethan. You built your entire criminal enterprise on the assumption that I would stay gone, and you used my guilt money as your camouflage. You can't prove that, he stammered, his bravado gone. I don't have to, I said. Aria Bloom, my attorney, is filing a full civil complaint in federal court in exactly 45 minutes. It details the fraud, the forgery, the conspiracy, and it includes a recommendation for criminal prosecution. Your name is all over it, the wire transfer logs, the metadata. We even have the lovely audio of you and Evelyn plotting to defame me. He was broken, a hollow suit. But you're right about one thing, I added, standing up. This is a professional conversation, so I'm going to give you some professional advice. You should probably get a lawyer, and you shouldn't leave the state. I walked to the door. Jax will validate your parking. He was still sitting there, frozen, as I left the room. But the real move, the golden piece, as Jax had called it, was not about Ethan. It was about his blind spot. An hour later, I was in Bozeman, an hour's drive from Willow Bend. It was neutral territory. I was in a small, independent coffee shop. The smell of roasted beans and melting snow thick in the air. She walked in at exactly 11 a.m., Harper Vale. She was 26 years old. She had her father's sharp features, but her eyes were clear, intelligent, and deeply cautious. She was an enforcement attorney for the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. According to Jax's deep dive, she was brilliant, ambitious, and utterly, ruthlessly ethical, and she adored her father, who had, in her eyes, built his firm from nothing. Ms. Hale, she said, not offering her hand. Your message was cryptic. Ms. Vale, Harper, thank you for coming. Please, sit. She sat, placing her briefcase on the floor. She did not order coffee. You have 5 minutes to explain why you've pulled me out of my office on a workday, and why your message said this was a matter of national financial security. I didn't play games. I slid a thin, unmarked manila envelope across the table. This is not a lawsuit. Harper, it's not a threat. It is a professional courtesy from one woman who built her career on facts to another. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. She opened the clasp and slid out the contents. It was not the full war room. It was just a taste, a single, clear, undeniable thread. The first page was a flow chart, a box on the left labeled Voss Vale Capital, Client Funds, a box on the right labeled Apex Global Strategies, Cayman, a box in the middle labeled the Kestrel Foundation, and arrows, showing a one-way path of money. The second page was a single wire transfer, a $200,000 donation from Apex Global to Kestrel. The third page was the corresponding Kestrel ledger, signed by Evelyn Archer, approving a $200,000 payment for a Willow Bend Community Center roof repair. The fourth page was a photo of the community center, taken 2 days ago. Its roof was 20 years old and covered in moss. "I don't understand," Harper said, but her voice was tight. "This is my father's foundation." "That foundation is a washing machine." "Harper," I said, my voice low and even. "My team has tracked $14.7 million in client funds, embezzled by your father, that have been laundered through that charity over the last 8 years. The documents in that file are verifiable through any federal portal. The wire numbers are real. The accounts are real." She went pale, not flushed, but a deep, sickly, grayish-white. She was seeing her entire life, her entire understanding of her father, dissolve in front of her. Why show me?" she whispered, her professional mask cracking. "Why not just send this to the SEC? Why come to me?" "Because," I said, leaning in, "this isn't just about your father. It's about his partner, Evelyn Archer, and it's about the town she held hostage. If this goes public the way I file it, it's a media circus. It's about revenge and family drama, and your father becomes a supporting character in my story." I paused. But if a dedicated ethical enforcement attorney at the SEC were to receive an anonymous tip and were to, independently, request an investigation based on verifiable data, well, that's not a story. That's a federal case. It's clean, it's precise, and it's handled by the one person I know will not, under any circumstances, let him slip through the cracks. I was offering her the chance to take control, to be the surgeon, not the spectator. She closed the file. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were already hardening. The shock was turning to ice. "If this is true," she said, her voice a flat, dead whisper, "if any of this is true, I will send a formal, internal request for a full investigation and subpoena of his records, today." "That's all I expected," I said. She stood up, the file in her hand. She looked at me, her face a stone. "Do not contact me again." She walked out of the coffee shop, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that Ethan Vale's world was over. As I drove back to Billings, my phone buzzed. The PR campaign was launching. Arya had officially filed the civil suit. The story of the gala was no longer the lead. My team had just released my first exclusive statement. I wasn't giving interviews about the money. I wasn't talking about the fraud, or the house, or the betrayal. The headline was, "Marissa Hale, CEO, on reproductive coercion and the fight for bodily autonomy." The narrative was shifting, exactly as I'd planned. I was no longer the angry daughter seeking revenge. I was a survivor, a victim of a sophisticated, cruel, and deeply personal crime. The story was moving from financial fraud to human rights. The public opinion, which had been a whirlwind of gossip, was now crystallizing. I was not the villain. I was the one who was fighting back. By the time I got back to the war room, Jax had a new item on the timeline, which stretched from 2004 to today, 2025. He pointed to a new entry, timed at 4:30 p.m. "It's done, Ms. Hale," he said. "We just got an alert from our source inside the SEC. A formal investigation has been opened by enforcement attorney Harper Vale. All records for Voss Vale Capital and Apex Global Strategies are being frozen, pending a full federal audit." The final, fatal blow, and I hadn't even had to throw the punch myself. The story went supernova. In the 48 hours after the gala, I was no longer a real estate CEO. I was a national symbol. The narrative I had carefully launched, reproductive coercion, had found fertile ground. Hashtags bloomed. I stand with Marissa. Justice for Ivy. Evelyn Archer. I's a monster. My PR team was fielding calls from every major network. But with support comes the inevitable backlash. Conservative talk shows, funded by people who look a lot like Ethan Vale, went on the attack. I was a vindictive daughter, a fame-hungry hysteric who was destroying the sanctity of the family for profit. They called me unstable, just as Ethan had planned. Death threats, crude and misspelled, began to flood the new foundation's inbox. My security detail tripled. I did not stay in Montana to be consumed by the fire I had started. I flew back to Denver, my home turf, my fortress, and I did what I do best. I changed the terms of the engagement. 2 days later, I stood on a different stage, not a makeshift platform in a house of lies, but the atrium of my newest building, Solstice Tower. The press conference was packed. No local crews this time. This was CNN, MSNBC, Forbes, the New York Times. I stepped up to the podium, not in a severe black dress, but in a simple navy blue suit. I looked strong, stable, and in control. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady, not a tremor to be heard. "I know why you're all here. You've seen the videos. You've heard the audio. You want to know what happens next. You want to know about the lawsuits. You want to know about the revenge." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "There is no revenge," I said, and the room seemed to inhale. "Revenge doesn't heal. It doesn't put a roof over a child's head. It doesn't pay for a therapist. It doesn't create a single law to prevent what happened to me from happening to someone else." I motioned to the banner behind me. It was not my corporate logo. It read, "The Silent North Initiative." "What happened to me," I said, "was a 20-year nightmare. But my case is not unique. Right now, in this country, thousands of young people are being exiled, disowned, and financially cut off by their families, often for just being who they are. They are left with nothing. No home, no support, no resources. I was one of them. I slept in a car. I got lucky. Most don't." I outlined the plan. A new foundation, launching today, seeded with $20 million of my own money, the Silent North Initiative. It would provide emergency housing, rapid legal aid, and long-term trauma therapy for any person under 25 who had been financially or physically abandoned by their family. "I am not here to talk about my past," I concluded, my voice ringing with a purpose that was not for sale. "I am here to build a future for the next 17-year-old girl freezing on a porch. We are not here to seek revenge. We are here to provide sanctuary. We need laws. We need therapy. And most of all, we need roofs. We are building the roofs. Thank you." I did not take questions. I walked off stage, the sound of flashbulbs popping like a round of applause. That night, in my penthouse, the adrenaline was gone. I was alone, staring out at the city I owned, and I had never felt more isolated. The victory felt hollow. I had changed the narrative, but the central, agonizing question remained. A notification pinged on my secure laptop. An email, routed through 3 layers of encrypted servers, had slipped into my private inbox. The sender was anonymous. The subject, Desert Ridge Hospital. You have the wrong story. My heart stopped. I opened it. The email was short, the grammar imperfect. "I was a nurse at Desert Ridge in Santa Fe. I am retired now. I saw your story on the news. You are talking about fraud. You are talking about money. You are missing the point. I was on duty in 2009. I remember the Archer woman, Evelyn. She paid cash. She said you were a troubled girl doing a family donation. We all thought it was strange. The patient was unconscious, in for an appendix. It was not right." My hands were shaking so hard I could barely use the trackpad. "Ivy isn't your niece," the email continued. "Evelyn Archer and her daughter Lydia. They couldn't carry a child. They took your eggs. They used the old boyfriend's sample. They created her in a lab and put her in your sister. She is not their child. She is your daughter. I am sick. I do not have long. I am sending this because God will not forgive me if I am silent. 2. Do not let them keep your child." Attached to the email were 2 files. The first was the full, unredacted patient file, DR 1488. It had my name. It detailed the elective oocyte retrieval performed concurrently with appendectomy. It listed me as unconscious. The second was a scan of a handwritten cash receipt. Received $15,000 for Special Fertility Services, Archer, signed by the clinic director, and in the memo line, in Evelyn's perfect, looping cursive, a logical solution. I sat in my chair. I did not move. The city lights blurred into a meaningless smear of color. I was aware, vaguely, of Jax entering the room. I must have triggered a silent alarm. He stood in front of me, his face a mask of professional concern. "Ms. Hale?" he said. I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen. "Marissa," he said, using my first name for only the third time in 8 years. He followed my gaze to the screen. He read the words, "Oh my God." He left and came back. He placed a bottle of water and a glass on the desk in front of me. I looked at my hand. I tried to tell it to move, to pick up the glass. My fingers wouldn't obey. I was the silent hurricane, a $50 million CEO, and I could not lift my own hand. The violation was so complete, so total. It had severed the connection between my brain and my body. This wasn't fraud. This wasn't theft. This was vivisection. This was a horror beyond language. It took Jax and my full legal team 48 hours to orchestrate it. A court order, sealed, a private lab, booked for a confidential paternity test, a security expert who managed to retrieve the hairbrush Ivy had used at the gala, the one her mother, Lydia, had left behind in her rush to flee the house. I supplied my own DNA sample. We waited. The call came from Aria Bloom. "Marissa, it's done." "Tell me," I said, my voice a dead thing. 99.99%. She is your biological daughter. The delayed discovery principle is in full effect. We can move for custody, and we can file criminal charges for bodily assault, kidnapping, and human trafficking. This is unprecedented. I hung up. I had to see her, not Evelyn, not Thomas, her, Lydia, the vessel, the incubator, the sister who had carried my child. I found her where her life had collapsed. She was at a cheap motel by the hospital in Willow Bend, visiting Thomas, who, I'd heard, had been checked in for cardiac distress after the gala. I cornered her in the parking lot, under the flickering green light of the hospital's ER sign. She looked like a ghost. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes swollen shut. When she saw me, she didn't run, she just crumbled. She slid down the side of her car and sat on the dirty asphalt, her sobs raw and ugly. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. She said it was the only way." Lydia gasped, her words torn apart by sobs. She said you owed me, that you had the easy life, that you were the mistake, and this was the logical way to fix it, to give me the one thing I couldn't have. "You knew the eggs were mine," I said, my voice flat. I didn't want to," she shrieked, pounding her fists on her knees. I knew they weren't anonymous. I knew they were from you. She told me. She said, "It's perfect. She'll never know, and the baby will still be ours." She bragged about it. She bragged about how smart she was, how she fixed the mistake by using the mistake. The pieces of her confession laid Evelyn's soul bare. It was a perfect, closed loop of pathological cruelty. "And Cole?" I asked. "The last piece? Where was he?" "Gone," Lydia spat, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Mom bought him, paid him $50,000, back in 2005, to leave, to give me space. She threatened to crush his father's construction company if he ever spoke to you again. He took the money. He just left, just like everyone else." She looked up at me, her face a ruin. You're going to take her, aren't you? You're going to take my baby." I looked at this broken woman, this accomplice, this victim, my sister, the mother of my child. I thought of the legal filings. I thought of the war Arya was ready to unleash. Custody, assault, kidnapping, winning. I walked away from her, to the edge of the parking lot. Through the chain-link fence, I could see the park across the street. A light snow was falling, and a family, a mother, a father, a little girl, was building a snowman. The girl, bundled in a pink snowsuit, laughed, and the sound carried across the street, high and clear. Ivy. I could destroy them. I had the money, the proof, and the moral authority. I could take Ivy. I could put Lydia and Evelyn in prison. I could win this war. I could take my trophy and go home. But Ivy wasn't a trophy. She was a 10-year-old girl who had just seen her world detonate, and she was the only innocent person in this entire septic tragedy. I turned back to Lydia, who was still weeping on the pavement. "Get up," I said. She flinched. "What?" "Get up." My voice was iron. "This isn't the end. This is the beginning. You are not going to be a victim, and I am not going to be the villain, not for her." She stared at me, uncomprehending. "I am not taking her," I said. "I am going to protect her. From you, from Evelyn, and from this. We are not going to war. We are going to therapy. All of us. You, me, Cole, and Ivy. We are going to build a roadmap, supervised, with the best child psychologists in the country. We are going to build a new truth for her, slowly and safely. And then, when she is ready, we will go to court, not to fight, but to ratify what we have built. Do you understand me?" Lydia just nodded. Tears of shock now, not grief. I was not offering forgiveness. I was offering a truce built not on healing, but on the absolute, non-negotiable protection of my child. I would not let them turn her into a casualty of their war, or of mine. The family court was a pressure cooker. It wasn't the grand ballroom. It was a small, beige, windowless room, packed shoulder to shoulder with press, local busybodies, and legal teams. The air was stale, smelling of wet wool and cheap coffee. We were here for an emergency petition for temporary custody and a protective order. Evelyn had filed first, demanding I be legally barred from all contact with Ivy. I had counterfiled. At the bench sat Judge Morrison, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for suffering no fools. Her gaze was sharp enough to cut glass. Evelyn, seated 20 feet away, was the picture of a grieving grandmother. She was in a modest gray suit, her face pale, her hands clutched. She was performing the role of her life, her lawyer, a slick import from Bozeman. Stood up. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "We are here to protect a child, a 10-year-old girl, Ivy Whitaker, who is the victim of a coordinated, vindictive media campaign, a campaign orchestrated by this woman," he pointed at me. "Ms. Hale," he continued, "is a biological stranger. She abandoned this family 20 years ago, now, driven by a psychiatric break or simple greed. She has returned to terrorize them. She has publicly defamed her own mother, a pillar of this community. She has traumatized this child. Biology does not equal nurture. Your Honor, Ms. Hale is unstable. She is dangerous, and we are asking for an immediate, permanent restraining order, barring her from any contact with the child she is clearly trying to leverage for her own gain." The room murmured. Evelyn let out a small, quiet sob, perfectly timed. Then Arya Bloom stood up. Arya was not a performer. She was a structural engineer. She built cases from steel and concrete. "Your Honor," Arya said, her voice clear and cold, "I am glad counsel for Mrs. Archer brought up the concept of organized crime, because that is precisely what we are here to discuss. This is not a custody dispute. This is the discovery hearing for a 20-year conspiracy of fraud, assault, and human trafficking, culminating in the abduction of a child." The room went dead silent. Evelyn's lawyer sprang to his feet. "Objection! That is inflammatory. It is baseless." "Is it?" Arya walked to the bench and placed the first file down. Then let's look at the facts. Exhibit A. A medical report from 2004. 0% blood compatibility between my client and her sister. Exhibit B. A handwritten note from Evelyn Archer, refusing the doctor's recommendation for follow-up testing. Why? Because she already knew my client was not her biological daughter. Arya's voice was a hammer, driving nail after nail. Exhibit C. A notarized, videotaped, and signed confession from Thomas Archer. In it, he details how Evelyn Archer, in 2005, meticulously framed my client, a 17-year-old girl, for grand larceny, how she forged the bank withdrawal slips, how she planted the stolen money, how she coordinated with the sheriff to ensure my client's exile. This wasn't an abandonment, Your Honor, it was an execution. I kept my eyes on the judge. Morrison's face was unreadable, but her knuckles were white on her gavel. It gets worse, Arya said. Exhibit D, the medical file from Desert Ridge Hospital, 2009, the file DR 1488. It details how Evelyn Archer, using a fraudulent medical proxy, ordered the non-consensual harvest of my client's oocytes while she was unconscious during an appendectomy. Exhibit E, the sworn testimony of the attending nurse, confirming the cash payment and the coercion. Exhibit F, the 99.99% DNA match. Ivy Whittaker is not Miss Hale's niece, she is her biological daughter. A woman in the press row gasped, a sharp, bird-like sound. And finally, Arya said, when my client, after 20 years, returned to this town, what did Evelyn Archer do? She forged my client's signature on a $780,000 loan document. She attempted to defraud her of $2 million more, and when she sensed she was caught, we have this. Arya signaled Jax. He hit play on a speaker. The audio filled the room. Evelyn's voice. Ethan, she knows. Ethan's voice. Drafted the report. The unstable daughter. We paint her as volatile, grasping. A conspiracy to defame, Your Honor. Arya concluded. This is not an unstable woman. This is a victim. This is a mother. And the only danger to that child is the woman who has built that child's entire life on a foundation of kidnap, fraud, and pathological lies. We are not asking, we are demanding Ivy's immediate removal from Evelyn Archer's custody and the establishment of a supervised therapeutic reunification with her biological mother, Ms. Hale. The courtroom was chaos. The judge slammed her gavel. Order! Order in my court! Evelyn's lawyer was sputtering. Fabrications! Deep fakes! This is a circus! It is not, a new voice said. It was Lydia. She was sitting in the back row, her face pale, her hands shaking. She stood up. She looked at Evelyn, then at me. Her face was a mask of terror. Mrs. Whittaker, sit down, the judge ordered. No, Lydia whispered. She walked forward, past the bar, holding a small silver USB drive in her hand. It's all true, and there's more. Evelyn let out a sound, a low, guttural wail of, no, Lydia, no. Lydia placed the drive on the judge's bench. She bragged, Lydia whispered, tears streaming down her face. She called me, from the clinic. She kept the payment schedules. She recorded herself, talking about her perfect plan, how she fixed the mistake. It's all on there. The texts, the audio. Please, just protect Ivy. She turned and fled the courtroom, her sobs echoing down the hall. Judge Morrison looked at Evelyn. Her expression was no longer judicial. It was one of pure, cold disgust. She looked at the drive. She looked at the mountain of evidence. She raised her gavel. Bang. This court finds sufficient, overwhelming evidence, the judge's voice boomed, to immediately and temporarily recognize Marissa Hale as the biological mother of the child known as Ivy Whittaker. All contact between the child and Evelyn Archer is hereby suspended. A mandatory, court-supervised therapeutic framework for reunification between Miss Hale, Mr. Whitaker, and the child will be established, effective immediately. We will reconvene in 60 days. Next case. It was done. As we walked out of the courthouse, blinking in the winter sun, the world had changed. The press swarmed, but their questions were different. My phone lit up. Jax held it up for me. It was a live feed from Billings, a phalanx of FBI and SEC agents, wearing blue windbreakers, was raiding the offices of Voss Vale Capital. We watched, live on my phone, as a shattered, handcuffed Ethan Vale was led out of his glass tower and put into the back of a black sedan. Harper Vale, true to her word, had acted. The headlines changed overnight. I was no longer the scorned daughter. I was the Willow Bend whistleblower. I was the survivor who uncovered a financial medical conspiracy. The narrative was mine. A few days later, a call came from the hospice. Thomas was declining. He had asked to see me. I went. He was a skeleton in a bed, his breath rattling. He couldn't speak, but he pressed a small, worn key into my hand. "A video," he rasped, his eyes pleading. My tablet. The last one." He had left me one last video confession. It wasn't about the past. It was a map. "The storage unit," his voice, weak and tinny, came from the tablet. Off Route 90, Unit 212. It's where she kept everything. The things she couldn't let go of. The things she couldn't destroy. I went that night, Unit 212, a cold, roll-up metal door. The key slid in. It wasn't a storage unit. It was a room, a perfect, carpeted, climate-controlled room, and in the center, a single, antique child's desk, my desk. On the walls, in archival frames, were my photos, the ones she had cut from the family albums, every school picture, every birthday, every Christmas. She hadn't destroyed them. She had curated them. She had built a secret museum to the daughter she had erased. And on the desk, in neat, chronological stacks, were her diaries, 40 years of them, 1983 to 2024. I sat in my own childhood chair and I opened the first one. I read for hours. I read about her own grinding poverty in rural Idaho. I read about her terror of being nothing, her obsession with control, her absolute, terrifying belief that the world was a zero-sum game. "Resources are finite," she had written in 1992. "Love must be chosen. There is not enough for everyone. You must protect the bloodline. You must cut away the weakness." And then, the entry from 2004, after the blood test. "The girl is not mine. The experiment is over. She is a drain on resources that rightfully belong to Lydia. She is a flaw in the design. I must correct the error. A logical solution is required." I read until the sun came up. I read about the plan to frame me. I read about the gray procedure at Desert Ridge. I read her referring to my stolen child as the asset. I understood. I finally, truly, understood the why. I saw the broken, terrified, pathologically narcissistic woman behind the monster. And it didn't matter. Understanding was not absolution. Her reasons were just the architecture of her evil. They were not an excuse. I looked at the wall of my own captured face. I took down the photo of me at 17, just before my exile. I slid it out of the frame, put it in my coat pocket, and walked out, leaving the museum of her sickness behind. I was taking that one piece back, for me. The next day, the final blow landed. The state attorney general, buoyed by the federal case against Ethan and the mountain of evidence from the custody hearing, held a press conference. Evelyn Archer was being indicted, not just for the fraud, not just for the money laundering. The DA, in a landmark move, was charging her with felony forgery, conspiracy, and 2 counts of reproductive coercion resulting in a non-consensual live birth. They had built a new charge, just for her. That evening, I was with Arya, planning the next phase. The long road of therapy, the slow, painful process of introducing myself to my daughter. My phone rang. It was Lydia. The criminal trial, she said, her voice small, fragile. I got the subpoena to testify. I know, Lydia. I just wanted to say. She took a shaky breath. If they need more, if you need more, before the final judgment, I'll say it again. I'll say all of it, on any stand you want. I want her to be safe. She was, for the first time, not Evelyn's daughter. She was just Lydia, and she was terrified. I know, I said. Thank you, Lydia. Just tell the truth. I hung up. The war was over. The reconstruction was about to begin. It was Christmas Eve. 20 years to the night since I had been pushed onto a porch covered in snow. Tonight, there was snow again, falling in thick, gentle flakes over Willow Bend. But I was not on the outside looking in. I was in the center of the town square, standing beside the community Christmas tree. The town was holding its annual caroling service. It was quiet, subdued, the gala, the trial, the SEC raids. It had all ripped the comfortable veil off this town. Tonight, they were just people, huddled together, singing softly under the lights. Ivy was next to me, her small hand tucked inside mine. Cole was on her other side, his face quiet and drawn, but present, and next to him, wrapped in a scarf, was Lydia. We were a strange, fractured portrait, a family being built, piece by painful piece, from the wreckage of another. Evelyn was not here. She was in a holding cell at the county courthouse, awaiting her arraignment on Christmas morning. My phone, quiet all evening, buzzed in my pocket, a single, secure text from Harper Vale. Ethan Vale signed a full confession 2 hours ago. He's pleading guilty to embezzlement and conspiracy, rolling on everyone. He confirmed Kestrel was the primary laundering vehicle. He also confirmed every single document and transfer approval was signed, in blue ink, by Evelyn Archer. He kept his own meticulous copies. It's done. Ms. Hale, she has no leverage left. I read it and felt, not joy, not victory, just the quiet, heavy click of the last lock falling into place. An hour later, as the carols were winding down, my security head, Kyle, approached me quietly. Ma'am, a call from the county jail. She is invoking her right to see you. Her lawyer is demanding it. She says it's her last request before tomorrow. Evelyn wanted one last performance. I'll go, I said. I looked at Lydia. I'm going. Don't, Lydia whispered, her voice tight with a lifetime of fear. Don't let her. She'll twist you. Not this time, I said. Kyle, I'll go. But on my terms. I want a closed room. I want her lawyer present. And I want Aria Bloom present. And I want the entire meeting videotaped, non-negotiable. The temporary holding room at the county jail was the color of dishwater. Gray floors, gray walls, a single steel table bolted to the floor. Evelyn was sitting there, not in emerald velvet, but in a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. Her hair was stringy, her face stripped of makeup. She looked old, small. But the moment I walked in, followed by Aria and her lawyer, the old fire sparked in her eyes. The queen was on a different, smaller throne, but she was still the queen. Marissa, she said, her voice smooth. You came? You asked, I replied. I sat opposite her, the camera in the corner of the room, set up by my team, glowed with a small red light. All of this, she waved a hand, dismissing the room, the jumpsuit, her entire collapsed world. This circus, you did this? You built this, I corrected. I did what I had to do, she snapped, leaning forward, the mask of the grieving mother replaced by the hard face of the tyrant. I did it to protect this family from everything, from poverty, from mediocrity, from errors. You You were the error, Marissa, and I tried to fix it. I tried to keep the family whole." "You didn't protect the family," I said, my voice as cold and flat as the steel table. "You protected your illusion of power. You sacrificed your children, all of us, to feed your own ego. You tore the family apart and called the pieces whole." Her lawyer shifted, uncomfortable. "Ms. Hale, if we are here to discuss a plea—" "We are not," Arya cut in. "We are here to listen." Evelyn laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "You have nothing. You have the ravings of a sick man and a hysterical girl. You have nothing but your own unstable, vindictive story. By the time I am done with you in court, this whole town will see you as the ungrateful, delusional monster you are. I will burn you to the ground." It was her last-ditch effort, the old threat, the familiar weapon of shame and public humiliation. I just stared at her. I waited. When she was finished, her chest heaving, I slid 2 documents across the table. "This is not a negotiation, Evelyn," I said. Arya tapped the first document. "This is a full civil settlement. You will waive all rights to the Archer property, all claims to the Kestrel Foundation, and any and all assets currently frozen by the state. You will cede everything. It will be placed in a trust for Ivy Whittaker, and Ivy alone." Evelyn sneered. "And why would I do that?" I tapped the second document. "Because of this is a confession. Not for the court, not for the press. This is for Ivy. It's a statement, to be videotaped, by you, right now, in it. You will detail the forgery of the 2005 loan. You will detail the harvesting of my eggs. You will state, for the record, that you did this, that you knew it was wrong, and that Lydia was an unwilling participant. You will give that child the one thing you've never given anyone, the truth. It will be sealed, held in trust, for her to access when she is 18. "You are insane," Evelyn spat. "You are truly pathologically insane. I will sign nothing." "I thought you might say that," I said. I nodded to Kyle, who was standing by the door. He dimmed the lights. On the wall opposite Evelyn, a large, flat-screen television, installed an hour ago, flickered to life. "You seem to be under the impression," I said, "that your only problem is me. But you forgot about your partner." The screen lit up. It was Ethan Vale, in a similar room, his face gray. He was speaking to a federal prosecutor. Her name was on everything. Ethan's voice filled the room, tinny and desperate. The Kestrel accounts? They were her idea. The beautification projects were her code. I just moved the money. She told me where to put it. The screen split. On one side, Ethan's confession. On the other, a spreadsheet. Jax's work. A perfect, color-coded timeline. The $14.7 million in stolen funds. And next to every single outgoing transfer, a scanned copy of Evelyn's signature on the Kestrel approval forms. "I didn't forge the loan, Marissa," I said. "But I know who did, and I know who signed every document that laundered Ethan's stolen money." I let the audio play, the full, detailed confession of her lover, throwing her under the bus to save himself. Evelyn didn't move. She just shrank. The air left her. The fire died. The queen dissolved. She stared at her own signature, over and over, condemning her. "Turn it off," she whispered. I turned it off. The room was silent. I pushed the papers and a pen back to the center of the table. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking. She signed the civil settlement, her elegant cursive suddenly spidery and weak. Then, she looked at the camera. Arya hit record. "My name," she began, her voice a dead monotone, "is Evelyn Archer. I forged the withdrawal slip in 2005. I framed Marissa Hale. I paid the clinic. I coerced them. I forced the retrieval of the eggs. I forged the loan. I signed the Kestrel documents. I did it." It was done. As we stood to leave, the door to the observation room opened. Lydia was standing there. She had been on the other side of the one-way glass. with a therapist I had arranged. She had heard every word. She looked at our mother, the small, shrunken woman in the orange jumpsuit. Tears were streaming down Lydia's face, but her head was high. She looked at me. "For the criminal trial," Lydia said, her voice shaking but clear. "I will tell the truth. I will tell all of it." She didn't have to anymore, but she would, for herself. The final cord was cut. I didn't stay to watch the midnight bells ring in the town square. I went back, and I collected Ivy, who had fallen asleep at Cole's house. In the town square, the tree was still lit, the carolers gone. I held Ivy in my arms. She stirred, sleepy. I had one ornament in my pocket, a simple, clear glass ball. "We should add one," I whispered to her, our breath fogging in the cold. I helped her hang it on a low branch. "This is for you," I said, quietly, just for her. "You are not a secret. You are not a mistake. You are a beginning." The town was still buzzing. In the coming days, people would approach me, apologies, awkward justifications, invitations to coffee. I ignored them all. I didn't need their absolution. The Willow Bend Gazette, now under new management, asked me for a final statement, a happy ending for their Christmas edition. "There is no happy ending," I told the reporter. "There is just an ending, forgiveness. Forgiveness is a boundary I set for myself, not a favor I grant to my abuser. I am setting my boundaries. They are finally setting theirs." The Archer House, surrendered in the civil settlement, was sold. To me, Solstice Urban's philanthropic wing, the Silent North Initiative, took possession last month. It is no longer the Archer House. It is Haven on Willow, a transitional living facility for young people exiled by their families. The kitchen, where they planned my ruin, is now a bright, communal cafeteria. The library, Evelyn's dark, mahogany war room, is now the career planning center, filled with computers and light. I was there last night, helping to hang curtains, when Ivy and Lydia came by. Ivy, who now splits her time, in a complex but peaceful arrangement, between Mom Lydia and Mom Marissa. She ran into the new kitchen, sunlight flooding the white subway tiles. She looked at the new, gleaming ovens, where other kids would learn to cook, to be safe. She turned, her smile brighter than anything in the room, and she ran to us. She grabbed Lydia's hand, then she grabbed mine. "Mom Marissa? Mom Lydia?" she asked, her voice full of a 10-year-old's simple, profound logic. "Can we make cookies? Right now?" The church bells began to toll, signaling midnight. Outside the new, clean windows, the snow was falling, thick and soft. The crimes were exposed, my motherhood was recognized, the house was repurposed, the cycle was, at long last, broken. I stood at that window, holding my daughter's hand, and looked out at the street. I didn't see a 17-year-old girl, shivering on a dark porch. I didn't see the ghost of the girl who was exiled. I just saw the woman who had finally chosen peace, and who, after 20 years, had finally learned exactly how to keep it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop a comment below, share your thoughts, and let's connect. Subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you want to support us further, hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it.